Once upon a time, in a lush green forest where the trees whispered in the wind and the streams babbled along rocks, lived a rabbit named Ruby and a tortoise named Tom. Ruby was swift and proud of her speed. She had silky white fur and large, powerful hind legs that made her the fastest creature in the forest. She spent most of her days darting between bushes, jumping over streams, and racing through meadows, confident that no one could ever catch up to her. Tom, on the other hand, was slow, methodical, and content with his pace. He had a rough, sturdy shell and short legs that carried him forward one deliberate step at a time. Though he moved slowly, Tom was known for his wisdom and calm demeanor. Always thinking before he acted, one sunny morning, while Ruby was showing off her speed to the forest animals, darting back and forth with effortless agility, she came across Tom, who was taking his time munching on a patch of clover by the side of the path. "Hey, Tom," Ruby teased, twitching her nose, "you're so slow. How do you ever get anywhere in this forest? I could run circles around you all day long." Tom, being patient as always, lifted his head and smiled. "Speed isn't everything, Ruby. Sometimes, taking your time and staying focused can get you much further than racing ahead," Ruby laughed. "That's ridiculous. I could get from here to the big oak tree on the other side of the forest in just a few minutes." "You'd take hours," the other animals, sensing a challenge, began to gather around. A deer, a fox, and a squirrel all watched with curiosity. "Why don't we settle this with a race?" Ruby suggested with a smirk. "Let's race to the big oak tree at the edge of the forest, and we'll see who gets there first." Tom thought for a moment and then nodded. "All right, Ruby. I accept your challenge. But remember, it's not just about getting there first. It's about how you run the race." The animals all agreed to set up the race. They decided to start at the clearing in the middle of the forest, where the ground was soft and mossy, and the sunlight dappled through the trees. The big oak tree, the finish line, stood tall and proud on the far side of the forest, its leaves shimmering in the distance. As soon as the signal was given, Ruby shot forward like a streak of lightning. She zipped past trees, leaped over rocks, and barely touched the ground as she ran. Behind her, Tom started his journey with slow, steady steps, one after the other, moving at his usual pace. Ruby looked back and saw Tom far behind her, crawling along. "This is going to be the easiest race ever," Ruby thought to herself. "I'm so far ahead, I might as well take a nap." Sure enough, Ruby found a soft patch of grass under a tree and decided to rest. "I'll wake up in time to finish," she thought as she yawned, stretched out, and closed her eyes. Soon, she was fast asleep, dreaming of how everyone would cheer her victory when she reached the oak tree. Meanwhile, Tom continued his slow but determined journey. He didn't stop to rest or to chat with the animals that crossed his path. He simply kept going, one small step after another. The forest around him was alive with the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves, but Tom kept his eyes on the path and his mind focused on the goal. Hours passed, and eventually, Tom came near the big oak tree. As he approached the finish line, some of the animals who had been watching the race began to gather, whispering in surprise. "Where's Ruby?" they wondered. Ruby, still sound asleep under her tree, didn't hear the growing commotion. She didn't even stir when a squirrel scurried past, chattering excitedly about how Tom was nearing the finish line. Finally, Ruby woke up, stretched, and realized how much time had passed. "Oh no," she cried, leaping to her feet. She raced toward the big oak tree as fast as she could, but by the time she arrived, Tom was already there, being congratulated by the other animals. "You did it, Tom," the fox exclaimed. You won the race, Ruby skidded to a stop, panting and out of breath. How? How could you beat me? She asked, still trying to catch her breath. Tom smiled kindly at Ruby. Like I said, Ruby, slow and steady wins the race. It's not just about speed, it's about perseverance, patience, and never giving up, no matter how far behind you might seem. Ruby hung her head, feeling a bit embarrassed. But then she smiled too. You're right, Tom. I was too focused on showing off and didn't take the race seriously. I should have stayed focused like you. From that day on, Ruby and Tom became great friends. Ruby learned to be a bit more humble, and Tom continued to share his wisdom with anyone who needed it. They often went on long walks together through the forest, Ruby slowing her pace to match Tom's, and Tom enjoying the company of his once boastful but now wiser friend. And so, the lesson of the rabbit and the tortoise spread throughout the forest, that sometimes, it's the slow and steady path that leads to true success.